Policy, history, media and technology, markets, and the business of culture. Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad.
There are a ton of entities, so this is not just who do I need to get sign off so we can get the sidewalk in front of the building fixed. This is New Jersey, New York State, New York City, Amtrak, which is obviously a national entity. And there's a ton of federal money that comes in. So like the Congress has views and they're the ones funding a lot of it. So like those are important views. The president clearly has some views. There's an environmental process that has to go through. There are developers. The governor plays big roles. So it is certainly complicated by the fact that there are so many entities.
Transit guru Sarah Feinberg on reimagining NYC's crisscrossing network of trains, planes, and automobiles, all of which is in sharp focus with the Knicks winning it all for the first time in 53 years, while countless tourists descend on the region for the World Cup. Stay with us. Watch Full Disclosure on YouTube and listen to us on NPR, Spotify, Apple, and all of the podcatchers. We put them all at one link, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. Please subscribe, rate us, tell your girlfriend, mother-in-law, friends, everybody, and catch me on CNN and NPR's Here and Now. Joining me from the NYC, which is still giddy about its Knicks winning their first title since 1973, and believe me, that's germane to this story, is none other than Sarah Feinberg. She's a transit guru, formerly headed the New York City Transit Authority and administered the Federal Railroad Administration. She was chief of staff for the Secretary of Transportation in the second Obama administration. She was on Amtrak's board. She's currently on the board of Southwest Airlines. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I got to tell you, you were very much front and center as I was watching this tableau of President Trump and Jim Dolan in the box, watching that one game that the Knicks lost.
Right.
And stepping back and reading these Wall Street Journal and New Yorker pieces about these two men, for better or for worse, could control the destiny of this blight on the city, Madison Square Garden, Penn Station, which you know all too well. Since 1999, I remember Bill Clinton and Daniel Patrick Moynihan saying that this is it. 2008, the governor saying, this is it, we're going to do it. And then 2012, Superstorm Sandy, and then other things. Whatever the inertia is, whatever the politicking is, something has conspired to keep this, the busiest transit hub in the hemisphere, in its early 70s mediocrity. And I said, I need to talk to Sarah this week.
Yeah.
Does that all make sense?
It makes total sense. Isn't it so funny? If you had asked all those guys 10, 20, 30 years ago, what do you think the chances are that you're all sharing, you're sharing a box at Madison Square Garden, watching the Knicks in the finals, and in between bites of chicken fingers or whatever, you're talking about, rebuilding Penn Station, and you're the decision makers. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's like a small world. But
there was that spirit of 73. As you know, there were many fateful decisions in the let's say the mid-60s to the early 70s, from the Penn Station, and clearly the act of vandalism. I don't know, the New York Times and everybody called it knocking down the original magnificent Penn Station, which was built in 1910. It only had a 53-year life. And then deciding, I guess, to sell the air rights to this Madison Square Garden, which Madison Square Garden originally was in Madison Square Park, came to Hell's Kitchen, and they decided to put it on the remnants of what was this glorious train station.
Yeah, beautiful building.
And so many other things, as you know, Sarah, have turned over in New York. Hudson Yards, what happened with the trauma of 25 years ago in the World Trade Center and the designs for that, and rethinking whole parts of town. And yet, this stays stuck in the sins of the late 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, I agree. I see where you're going. And it's all of that is quite true. That said, I have also been trying to get new tunnels built to Penn Station since 2013, and many people were working on that project many years before I came along. So it's New York, it's New York City, it's the United States of America. We build really slowly. We plan for too long. We let things get too expensive. We can't make decisions. We let egos get in the way. And we lift up our heads and we find ourselves decades into a challenge, having done next to nothing.
Step back from all of this. And again, this is very New York centric. I was a New Yorker for 12 years. I visited for the first time with my fifth grade class in 1986. We took the Amtrak from Miami to New York's Pennsylvania station. And it looks exactly as it did when I moved to the city in 2000. And I'll tell you, Sarah, I was in tears when I arrived by Amtrak into New York last fall and for the first time saw the Moynihan train depot across the street in the old post office. And it was breathtaking. I never felt like, I used to come into Grand Central, but to come in on an Amtrak train and to see these, the buildings through the glass and to feel like it's as a place that you would meet someone for lunch or for a drink.
Beautiful building.
It's gorgeous. And it happened in spite of them saying it would never happen. But it only represents 10% of the traffic that comes in that massive hub. I saw a stat that the 600 or 650,000 people who go through Penn Station represent more than JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark Liberty combined daily.
Yep, that's right. Yep, that's right. Look, Moynihan is a beautiful building. And look, there's a lot of places to start here. We can start with politics. We can talk about the bureaucracy.
I want to do governance. You know about this, right? And you understand that it's not just one single authority. I mean, outside Robert Moses, who passed away in 1981, there's the New Jersey Transit, Port Authority. There's the MTA, there's the governor, there's City Hall, there's, I believe, Amtrak. Chris Christie slowed down the rebuilding of the tunnels or the massive project after Superstorm Sandy. So there's this analysis paralysis. Will you illustrate that governance structure for us?
So you're right. There are a ton of entities. So this is not just, who do I need to get sign off so we can get the sidewalk in front of the building fixed, right? This is New Jersey, New York State, New York City, Amtrak, which is, obviously a national entity. And there's a ton of federal money that comes in. So like the Congress has views and they're the ones funding a lot of it. So like those are important views. The president clearly has some views. There's an environmental process that has to go through. There are developers. The governor plays a big role. So it is certainly complicated by the fact that there are so many entities. One thing that I think is critically important that no one should lose sight of is that one of the reasons this has been really difficult to get done over decades, honestly, is egos. Like a lot of egos involved in what's Penn Station going to look like? Is it my design? Is it his design? Is it the design that I think, favors transit? Is it the design that favors Metro North and Long Island and commuter railroads? Is it all about Amtrak because they actually own the station? What is it that, who's going to win? Dare I say that if for the last 40 years, the folks who were making the decisions in this process, did not have large egos, it's quite possible that we would be well on our way by now. That's one woman's view. And it's a certain kind of ego, right? It's I gave you the money, therefore I get to decide the design, or I had an audience with the president and this is the way he wants to go, and therefore we should go with my preference. Or, Amtrak is fine, but really these are, Metro North or Long Island Railroad and New York City Transit riders who mostly use the station, so we should be focusing on them. What you can sort of look at it in many different ways. Potentially an unpopular view, but my view is if women had been running all of this for the last 20 years, the decisions would have been made, the station would have been rebuilt, and we'd have a much more functioning station at this point. But those are not the people who are involved at all.
Well, Sarah, here's a civics question. I'm not playing coy. What about eminent domain? This is clearly a national issue, a national security issue. When you saw after Superstorm Sandy that New Jersey Transit and Amtrak and the Tunnel Authority, whatever it was, the Bridge and Tunnel Authority, were saying some of these things have not been significantly upfitted since the Roaring 20s. And that was end of 2012, and we're in 2026 right now. I understand that you're talking about a massive transit hub that's dealing with Amtrak, which was only, Penn Railroad reconstituted under the Nixon administration 50 plus years ago. You're dealing with New Jersey Transit and all the commuters that come in to that station in the pit. You're dealing with the Long Island Railroad coming in from the east side. You're dealing with various extensions, to say nothing about all the subways coming in and out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So there isn't a person that can, you worked with Mayor Mike at Bloomberg. There are people who have decreed things in the past, whether Times Square or Hudson Yards or what was it that terrible thing that stood forever on Columbus Circle that became the Time Warner Center, the New York Coliseum.
look, there's a lot of things wrong with Penn Station. And I, as a former safety regulator, have lost many hours of sleep worrying about things in Penn Station. We can talk about that because we've seen some
Yeah.
incidents just in the last couple weeks that I think give folks a lot of pause about how safe the infrastructure is at the moment. But I think two main reasons you haven't seen someone come in and just say, everybody else out of here, I'm taking over, I own this, is one, there's no real safety issue that would drive that kind of action. This is not Sandy where we've got floodwaters. This is not a terror attack. This is like, we've got a whole lot of stuff wrong. And it's in places where, certain stakeholders care about what's wrong over there versus what's wrong on those tracks versus what's wrong on that platform versus what's wrong in that seating area, right? But the main thing is this is a really expensive project and no one wants to own footing the bill. So if you say, everybody else out of here, I'm taking over, which we sort of saw, President Trump do several months ago, last year now, the first thing Kathy Hochul did, the governor of New York, was say, great, your problem now. Look forward to it. You own this. Now, ultimately, I thought that was a really smart political move. It's probably not going to ultimately work out because I think the Trump administration has already been hinting at the fact that they're going to make New Jersey and New York pay for pieces of this. But, I think that's the main reason is no one's wanted to come in and foot the entire bill. They talk about 8 billion right now. I mean, they've talked about 6 billion. They talk about 8 billion. It's going to be more than that. So it's going to be a big price tag.
Sarah, talk to me about Amtrak. Because I was always under the impression that was the White House, whatever act came out to build Amtrak in the early 70s, that it was a stopgap. It was just to let these bankrupt railroads kind of continue to live to see a day so that Congress could recapitalize them. And we're separating out kind of bad train company to this. And yet here we are 55 years later. The inertia of Amtrak. It comes in for funding requests. You could say the Northeast Corridor, of which this is its beating heart, New York's Penn Station, is its great, indispensable, profitable line. But unfortunately, you have to carry all of the loss leaders across the great country in order to get it funded every other year or so by Congress.
Well, that's true for most years. Now, when Joe Biden was president, Chuck Schumer was, majority leader. When Andrew Cuomo was governor, and then when you've got folks like that in charge, there's never been a better time for Amtrak, right? But that was one moment in time. It is, like, as an aside, one of the more interesting things that when people talk about, like, Democrats, some progressives should primary Chuck Schumer and he should retire. I don't think New Yorkers always understand the power of the leadership and, like, how much money you can get for your state if you're in the leadership. So it's, like, stunning to me. But anyway, those few years were very good for Amtrak. But there are always Republicans in particular, and frankly, folks who represent states that don't have a lot of Amtrak service or don't have any Amtrak service at all, who are not eager to foot that bill. And that's, like, one of the great conundrums. But it's also, there are a whole lot of people who live in the Northeast who don't really want to pay for Arizona to get water all the time, right? And who don't want to, bail out New Mexico for whatever's going on. But that's part of living in a country. So it is always a funding fight. I will say, Amtrak under the leadership of Tony Kosha, who's been leading the Amtrak board for many years now, has become very astute about making friends on both sides of the aisle, of making many more Republicans than in the past understand the benefits of Amtrak service in their states, reconnecting the service to Mississippi and Louisiana following Katrina took many years, but, like, those are Republicans down there and they are super happy that service is back. So it's an important sort of political play across the board. But certainly in an era like the one we're in now, Amtrak's going to have trouble getting the funds that it needs. And I think we see Amtrak, there have been some recent machinations. They know exactly the challenges that they're up against. And I think they're doing a good job of threading the needle at the moment to make sure they get what they need.
Sarah, did New York dodge a bullet in that if the Knicks lost in San Antonio and had to come back for another game at the Garden at the confluence with the World Cup, I remember all the Brazilian fans having to go there to get to the Meadowlands. So it would have really taxed the entire capacity of everything, the holding power of this. It could have, thank God that nothing bad happened. Maybe at best it would have just been a bad look that a city
Yeah.
of this stature could not handle that kind of inundation.
Yeah, and in circumstances like that, you're going to see the station just really not perform well, right? There's just too many people. There's not enough space. People are on top of each other. You can run the best service you've ever run without delays. Probably not able to, but like you can run fantastic service, and you're just not going to be able to meet the needs of everyone. The World Cup has been a bit of a mess in my one woman's view, and I'm not criticizing the MTA or anybody else, but I do think it's been a bit of a mess in terms of communicating to folk how to get to the stadiums. And, I think people have been concerned about the price tag of the New Jersey Transit tickets. And so they have not been eager to sort of jump in at the $98 price tag. And so they're sort of either waiting till the last minute or thinking about, I'll get a ride out there, I'll get an Uber or whatever. And then you're obviously in 4, 5, 6 hours of traffic, and that's a mess. But again, like if we had that confluence of events, you just would have seen, like it would have been embarrassing, and you would have seen the station and the infrastructure really sort of groan under all that, under all those people, but it would have performed. What I worry about much more is, when you have the station packed during rush hour and something goes wrong and you have to
Right.
get people out really fast. That was my concern when I was the FRA administrator.
Well, that pit, that New Jersey Transit pit, I mean, the claustrophobia, and it's the easiest thing in the world to dunk on Penn Station and Jersey Transit. And this is really gumming up works. People can't see their kids. The trains are there. There's a real productivity hit.
Yeah.
This is not notional, but a safety, the urgency of a safety thing, where the impression is that the whole infrastructure is barely hanging on. Was that story apocryphal that there's a bridge for the Amtrak or something, that somebody actually get out and hammer a bridge on the New Jersey side?
The Portal Bridge.
It?
Yeah. I mean, that is it. I mean, it's a famous story where it's actually considered part of the Gateway Project, which is a series of like 11 projects that ultimately just improve service and infrastructure.
So is this bridge in the Meadowlands?
I think it is. I don't know. I'm embarrassed that I can Google it while we're.
No, but it's to say like
the location. I'm like pretty good at geography, but like once you say like where is that?
No, my lament is, think about how many things that have changed since you came to New York for your first job. To think of that versus the technology, nothing else in the world is dependent on 100-year-old technology. And so much money has been created in this city. Whole swaths of the city. I mean, up until the mid 80s, a lot of the sewage would go raw into the Hudson River. I mean, that's unthinkable today, but the High Line or the dereliction of the West Side, or entire neighborhoods that you would never venture to that are now hugely gentrified. But this just remains so frustratingly behind.
Totally.
And it slows down the entire region.
Totally. It slows down the entire region. You've got circumstances when you've got a guy using a hammer to bang something back into place so that so that millions of commuters can actually get to their job, which boosts the economy of the most important city in the country. All of this absurdity, right? And meanwhile, like we've got AI and we've got, drones, and we've got all kinds of new tech that blows the minds of folks who were standing around trying to get all this stuff done 20 and 30 years ago. I will say New York often cannot get out of its own way on this stuff. I mean, it goes for a lot of other parts of the country too. But again, back in 2013, my biggest concern about Penn Station was, if you have a fire, if you have a smoke condition, if you've got a train you've got a track smoke condition, which happens all the time, you've got an active shooter or someone else causing problems, how are you getting all those people out without a stampede, right? Remains a problem to this day, right? Lots of things have improved, but and the MTA, by the way, made a bunch of improvements to the station to bring in a lot of extra light, to widen the egress, to widen some exits and entrances. So that's all really good news. My biggest concern about, building new tunnels under the Hudson River going back to 2012 was, if we get a train stuck in the tunnel and we've got folks stuck in there for hours, we'll have a way to get them out. They will be fine. it will be an unpleasant day for them. But if we get to a point where you've lost a tunnel, this will be the greatest work from home experiment in the history of New Jersey. This was pre-pandemic, right? This was like COVID wasn't even on the radar
Of
screen.
course.
It was like we're not, but we cannot bus enough New Jerseyans in, right? We are not going to, like no one's going to spend that time. No one's going to spend that time in their car. We can't run enough bus service, and all of a sudden they're going to stop coming in. And like, what are you going to do? And there's a small group of folks who are sufficiently motivated to get this stuff done. When it comes time to negotiate and give a little bit on like, what are we going to do about the garden? What are we going to do about the block that's south of the station? What are we going to do about through running? Well, then all of a sudden, everyone sort of digs in their heels and says, it's my way or the highway.
And there isn't an ability for somebody to come in on tangent and say, this is, I don't know, force majeure, or I'm declaring, eminent domain or whatever it is. This is where I used to think that somebody could, I mean, the perception was Giuliani kind of did it with Times Square. Maybe is it the president that can come in and nationalize a project or oversee it? After all, Amtrak is quasi-private. Amtrak still owns the land under Madison Square Garden, the station under
Amtrak
Madison Square
owns
Garden.
the tunnels, and Amtrak owns the sort of policing and like the sort of running of the
Sure.
station. And then MTA has a huge piece. Like it's just like MTA has a huge piece. New Jersey Transit like has a huge piece. Your question
It was called in that big New Yorker feature like Yugoslavia, one of the engineers
yeah, it's
compared
like the
it to.
Balkans or
A
whatever. Yeah.
lot of fiefdoms just kind of slapped together, and you get the feeling of kind of everything is duct taped together, right? No shortage of like rusted water coming down, cracks, the low ceilings. You don't really want to linger. You want
Yeah.
to get to your train assuming you can rush to the train. Now, this has been a problem forever. I will say, let's step back for a second. Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad. We're joined by New York City Transit guru Sarah Feinberg. She's joining us from the East Village. She formerly headed the New York City Transit Authority. She was on the board of Amtrak, and she's currently on the board of Southwest Airlines. I have to ask you to put your subway conductor hat on for a minute. And when we see these videos on Instagram, whenever there's heavy rain, or
Yeah.
things that happen and you see the cascades, the waterfalls. That didn't happen in my time in New York. If anything, occasionally I would go to the bottom of the island under One New York Plaza, the old 1-9 train, and you'd see some water seep in from maybe the battery. But now, I guess, with climate change and sea level rise and this resilience, it's becoming all too common.
Welcome to climate change. That's exactly what it is. So it's these really fast, quick thunderstorms that just dump a ton, particularly in the summer, obviously, that dump 2, 3, 4 inches of rain in 45 minutes, 90 minutes. When I was running transit, there was a thunderstorm in Washington Heights, and I want to say it was like 2 inches of rain in 40 minutes or something like that. That is a massive amount of rain for any area, but add that you're like it's sort of near both rivers, you're in a flood zone, you're in all that.
Sure.
Plus, in most of these places, you're entering the station from the street, and there might be, it's for most of your listeners probably been in the New York City subway, but for anybody who hasn't, from the sidewalk, you might step up like one step and walk a couple feet, and then you're downstairs. So it's not like it's not like the water has to rise very far before it's just like coming down the steps. And a lot of these photos are, that you see are tons of water coming down the entrances and the stairwells. Certainly, the grates above the system are open. And so everything from the street is like, or for the sidewalks are shooting down. And so that's the main thing. Now, for many years, we also had, it's funny because this is such a basic issue. It's like an issue you would have in your own apartment or your own houses. The drains were clogged. Like we weren't doing a good job of cleaning the drains. And it turned out that we ended up, having a big effort. This was probably 2019, 2020, to clean out those drains, and things worked a little better. But when you get those huge thunderstorms, you're going to have a flooding situation. And what we would often communicate to folks is you're going to have a flooding situation. And guess what? It's going to be over in 40 minutes. Like, I know it's not pleasant. I know you got to get home. This is not a 2-day problem. This is literally a 40-minute problem. So go to the bar, Go to the coffee
But
shop.
Sarah, this does hasten kind of the depreciation of these already kind of old assets that are
Oh,
barely hanging
totally.
on. I mean, the
Totally.
rust, the crack, there are parts where, I mean, this stuff is sluicing through. You wonder if it's AI
No,
now
I
increasingly.
know. Look, it's tough on the system. And by the way, like, don't forget, there's actual like tons of streams that are running underground in New York City
Yeah,
all
I
the time.
think people forget that these reclaimed
Yeah.
streams and the amount of water that you have to pump out, or the amount of sewer water that just goes back into the rivers when you get
The
an inch or
MTA,
two.
yeah, the
Yeah.
MTA has pumps like on the driest day in New York City. The MTA is pumping tons and literally tons and tons of water out of the system just because of the streams that are in the ground around the system. So look, it's terrible for the system, but it is climate change, and there are certainly some things that we can do. And I think some things that the MTA has done well in trying to address it. But when you have thunderstorms and you get 1.5 to 2.5 inches of rain, you're going to have a very tough time. And by the way, it's the toughest on the workers because they're in that station and they've suddenly got 14 inches of water around them, and they've got people who like are coming down
Of
saying like,
course.
"Is the train running?" It's like the train's not running,
I
but
mean, to
you are
say
about
nothing of these bus drivers in Queens and in
right.
Brooklyn where you see these things happen. And I have to ask you, is it mythology that, President to New York City dropped dead, that a lot of these decisions in expensive generational infrastructure upgrade were made fatefully, that New York punted on these in the late 70s during its fiscal crisis? Because my impression, again, I don't mean to over personalize this, when I first came to New York and I saw all the money there, all the Fortune 500 companies, the hedge fund, private equity money, the technology money, the cost of living, all of these various things, it does just not jibe with that transit system. Like you see under 731 Lexington, a building that we both shared, right? The subway system, it's not commensurate with that. I mean, even DC's that I think was completed in the early 80s seems much more with it. But there's a huge disparity in kind of the stature of New York versus kind of the transit entrails right beneath it.
Look, that is true. And there are many fathers to these decisions, and mothers, I guess, too. Many decisions were made along the way that got us to where we are. That said, in Washington, D.C., the stations are beautiful. The service is pretty reliable, and there are frequently 15, 20, 25, 35-minute headways. Like, I mean, because I used to live in Washington and like you
I
get
know.
used to that service and you're like, I missed the train. It's 12 minutes till my next one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's rush hour, maybe it's 9, right? And there were sometimes crowds on platforms that were like scary in my opinion. They were like hovering on like falling into the tracks. But by the way, like try to get a red line out of Bethesda on like a
I
Saturday
know.
and it's like 25-minute
I know
headway.
it.
So
I
like
know it.
so like you don't want that kind of service. And by the way, you can't get everywhere you need to in the city. Like you're either going to get off and walk 3/4 of a
I know
mile
it.
or yeah. So look, one of the things about New York City's system is it's the largest system in North America in terms of numbers of stations, right? More than 430 stations. We have more miles of track than almost any other entity. We've got our stations are huge. In my opinion, we've overbuilt them in many cases, but they are absolutely massive so that we can both fit as many people on the platform as possible, but also run long trains because so that we can fit more people. And I will put the New York City transit workforce up against any workforce in the country on any given day, and they will win and kill everybody else every single time. Like they're unbelievable. I often tell people don't mistake a system that's not attractive for a system that doesn't work well, because it is often not attractive. Like we've got all kinds of people in the system. We've got folks who are just using it to get to and from work and to and from.
No, it's not Chuck Norris in some, film in the mid 70s being mugged and various,
Right,
graffiti on the Redbirds and everything. It's a
right.
far ways from that.
Yeah.
But
And
there's
and
still
there's only
something
so
that's
much you
right.
can do. There's only so much
Yeah,
you can do to clean it. You can only clean it so many times a day, which we did during COVID, and it
of
was like
course,
sparkling.
religiously.
But you don't want to spend your resources doing that all the time. And it is a system that holds up. And not many systems would hold up to what it holds up. So New York City can be 110 degrees in those stations in the summer, and it can be minus 10 in the winter, right? We've got leaves, we've got rain, we've got snow, we've got ice, we've got, crazy high temperatures.
There, I'm sorry, you've got rats. It's
We've
like the
got
ones would come out at Columbus Circle and taunt me. They'd look at me every day at the end of the track. I was like, is no one doing anything about it? I know it's not
By
your
the way,
problem.
as long as they're not eating the wiring, I don't really care.
But that's the problem is they eat the wiring. They're problematic in DC. They're very audacious.
Yeah.
And you have to be a survivor. And maybe at some point New York City embraces that. But I digress. Full disclosure, we're joined by New York City Transit wonk, Sarah Feinberg. Please do stay with us. Full Disclosure airs on NPR, Spotify, Apple, all of the fine podcatchers. And of course, you can watch us on YouTube. I know that my mother-in-law does. I put them all at one neat link for you, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. A shout out to our radio listeners. Let's see, we are on WVTF, Radio IQ, across the great Commonwealth of Virginia and in parts of West Virginia, which we'll talk to Sarah about. We are on KPPQ out in Ventura, California, and a shout out to WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. Holler if you too would like us on your air, and don't forget to catch me every week on both CNN and NPR's Here and Now. If you're just joining us, my guest, and I'm giddy to have her on, you're very generous to join us on short notice, is Sarah Feinberg. She's transit guru. She lives in New York. She was formerly the head of the New York City Transit Authority. She administered the Federal Railroad Administration. She was chief of staff for the Secretary of Transportation in the second Obama administration. She's been on Amtrak's board, and she's currently on Southwest Airlines board, and we will get into that. I don't want to mansplain or anything, but there's always, I was invited to give a speech at the Javits Center a couple of years ago, which, by the way, blew me. It's nice. There's a rooftop.
I got my first COVID vaccine there.
It's nice. Like when did that all take place? And there's that entire rebuild of that West Side Highway. And I felt like sharing this story. Do you know why it's called in cities like those, the seedy districts are called the Tenderloin?
I don't.
And again, I'm not mansplaining, but I
don't. No, I don't.
I don't think this is apocryphal. There was a corrupt police officer in the late 1800s named Clubber Williams who asked for a transfer from his precinct near Gramercy to go to the West Side, which was full of opium dens, red light district, whorehouse, and everything. And he goes, and if I get this transcript, I ain't going to be eating chuck steak anymore. I'm going to be eating tenderloin. That's literally how it happened. So you can fact check me on it, but I love to tell New York City stories. I saw a bunch of tourists by the High Line, like a quarter mile west of Penn Station.
And you're like, let me tell you why this is called called this.
But it's gorgeous when you go on the High Lines. When you're there, on the High Line, when you're with family, no one will believe that these places were so derelict that the mob was really taking apart copper and wires and everything, and it was derelict for much of the 70s and 80s. New York has a metabolism for turning over often.
Yeah, that's right. That's funny. I wonder is that why the Tenderloin in San Francisco is called the Tenderloin in San Francisco?
You can look it up. I think it's ascribed to a corrupt New York City cop, John Clubber Williams. But if I'm wrong, then gosh, it could be worse than to have been fact checked by Sarah Feinberg. But Sarah, I'd love to talk, because I only have you for so long. I'd love to talk to you about airlines. You're on the board of Southwest Airlines right now, which people out west have such a love relationship with Southwest that you can, if you don't use your tickets, it almost is like this intersection of bus and plane. If you don't use it, you could save it for another time. If you want to decide on moment's notice to go to Tucson from LA or something like that. I'm from South Florida, and it lost its bête noire, Spirit Airlines, a few weeks ago. You don't often see airline liquidations anymore. There's forbearance. The credit markets are good. There's significant mergers that happen in the wake of 9/11. United shacks up with Continental. There is Northwest with Delta Airlines. There was US Air and America plus America West. What is the system? What is the metabolism? The system certainly feels crowded. It's taxed. There are tech issues right now. That is its own problem. I mean, you've certainly experienced it with Newark, right, where there are delays and coming into New York. What is the state of play with like the entire industry looking at the kind of the remains of a fallen discount carrier? There are slots. There are so many planes. There's a surfeit of talent at a time that there's a labor shortage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, look, I am I am a board member at Southwest Airlines, which I think, by virtue of serving on the board, makes me smart enough not to talk about Southwest Airlines without checking with the investor relations team and the lawyers.
Talk broadly about how
But
this
yeah, but
happened
I was
because
going to say I
yeah,
should probably just say that because
sure.
that's a rule of the road. But for anybody who's on a public board, but I would say, and look, I think like the airline business is incredibly competitive. I think look on being on the outside looking in, everyone knows that and sort of sees it play out every day. Actually, being inside the industry, you obviously have a even closer view on it. It's an incredibly competitive industry. That said, it's also an industry that comes together and works together at the right moments when they need to. And it was no secret. There were many stories written about the fact that the administration, the Trump administration, did not want Spirit to go into bankruptcy for lots of good reasons. It's not good to lose an airline. It's not good to lose an airline that's low cost. And I think I give everyone credit for having tried to sort of come in and do what they could to help. And from the outside, anyway, looked like they sort of went from bad to worse pretty quickly. But the entire industry has been pretty vocal about saying, like, this isn't good for anybody. Like, it may be that, there are some momentary, bumps for the other carriers because the Spirit folks have to go somewhere. And so they end up on other airlines. But it's not good for anybody when we lose, a competitive airline that, a lot of people were counting on to sort of be an affordable choice to go visit family and like take a much needed vacation. So, I think it was a sad moment for everybody in the industry.
At the intersection of planes, trains, and automobiles, there's that air train station in Newark, and I had such high hopes. Back in the day, I would fly Continent. That was my college airport that I would fly into Newark Airport and
Yeah.
take a shuttle or take a train, to Central Jersey. But it was great in that a futuristic monorail would take you from a very nice, Continental had United had really re-upped its part of Newark, which was dreary in 1970s ish before that. But then the problem is it connects you to a New Jersey Transit Amtrak leg, and you're only as slow. The bottleneck becomes that thing as it crawls into Penn Station. Um, Talk to me broadly about Newark Airport, because we saw the confluence here of kind of Meadowlands and Penn Station, and it's had its issues. And this was written about over the last couple of years. That is a very significant international hub of getting people in and out of metropolitan NYC.
Look, it's a really important airport, and they had a really tough summer last summer when they were having both sort of the construction issues and air traffic issues at the same time. But let me tell you, having been at DOT and helped manage the FAA and sort of all, getting a crash course in air traffic control and how that whole system works, and it is eye-opening. And there is no individual airport that really controls its own destiny on really anything at this point. It's the air traffic control system. It's the TRACON, which is sort of the umbrella air traffic control for larger regions. Certainly, you've got weather issues and traffic issues, but it is running an airport is, I think, in my opinion, one of the harder jobs in all of the transportation industry. I will say New York and New Jersey is very lucky to have an incredibly competent port authority.
I didn't even mention the Port Authority once. I don't
Yeah,
know
but
if that's in
everyone
the
sort of
vernacular of our listeners,
when
right?
you think, yeah, totally. People may remember from the Chris Christie Port Authority like scandal,
Sure.
Bridgegate, like we're going back a while now. A lot that all came through the Port Authority, and so folks may have a bad impression of the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. It's actually like highly competent. It's been run by fantastic people. Rick Cotton did a fantastic job over the last decade. Now Catherine Garcia is running it. Every single person in leadership at the Port Authority right now is a woman, and they are doing the Lord's work in a time when it is really hard to run airports and customs and rebuild runways and get traffic in and out. And oh, by the way, a million people are coming for the World Cup. And ICE and Homeland Security is threatening to like shut down your customs because they're, grumpy. So it's like it was a tough time and they're doing a great job.
So that's a whole other player. I mean, I Port Authority to me was synonymous with uh, the late World Trade Center in 2001, but also the Port Authority bus terminal on 42nd Street, right?
Yep.
So that's another player, and it's not exogenous. You're dealing with the governor of New Jersey, you're dealing with the mayor of New York, you're dealing with the governor of New York, you're dealing with the head of the MTA,
And you
you're
have a board.
dealing with Amtrak, the board, and others.
You have a board, you have a police force, you have, I mean, it's like,
Amtrak, police, and yet, so as the paradox is, so much gets done in New York. That High Line project, all this stuff. I mean, the plans for the new World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower, it all got done in less than 20 years. And I guess one of the questions I have in this is the proportion of this versus the automobile in New York. I was in Buckhead recently in Atlanta, and it seems like the Waymos are everywhere. And they've almost supplanted, there's city buses. There's the, what is it, the BART? Not the BART, the Metra
the
train
MARTA.
in Atlanta, the MARTA. Sorry, I lost track. I had to buy another card. And then these Waymo vehicles everywhere. And it had me thinking, if I ever got the chance to ask you, there have been parts of Manhattan that have been, what was that area? Was it 7th Ave or Broadway near 42nd Street that became a pedestrian area? Is the
Oh, yeah,
city,
yeah.
yeah, is the city broadly open to throttling cars? You saw with congestion pricing was a back and forth in the interest of freeing up space and maybe revenue to plow back into a system that desperately needs that money.
Well, so let me start with full disclosure. I do a lot of work for New York City Taxi now, for the yellow taxis in New York, which is an industry that I am so fond of. I'm in love with the taxi industry. I had never done any taxi work until 4 years ago. And I absolutely love the drivers, the culture, the industry, the sort of comeback story
Do
in
you
New York.
get free halal lunch?
No. Can you believe that?
You should
Um,
flex that. You should flex a medallion
Good.
on
I should. I
56 and
should.
sec.
Where's my hat? My hat's not out here. I'm usually when I'm not on YouTube with you, I'm wearing a yellow taxi hat
Wow.
that says Signal Taxi on it. And I was in an airport once and I had it on, and a woman goes, "If you walk outside with that on, do you get a taxi?" And I was like, "No, you
No.
still have to hail one."
So what is the state of play with that, with Uber and self-driving and
Right.
cars, commuters coming into the city? Like, how
So
do you account for that constituency?
So for a brief moment there, we had Waymos with a driver in the vehicle in New York City doing so-called mapping of the streets. During that experiment, there was an incident of a Waymo with the driver in it taking a right to go north on Fifth Avenue into a crosswalk. So like
Yeah.
that's my example number one of like, you can put Waymos a lot of places. You should not put them in Manhattan. You should not put them in Brooklyn. You should not put them in the Bronx. You shouldn't put them in any of the boroughs because like there's no room for error on the streets of New York, right? Not that there's room for error elsewhere,
You
but
could
where
see
you've got
almost Dustin Hoffman saying, "I'm walking here. I'm walking." Sorry, I had
exactly when you've got 6 lanes of traffic, like
Sure.
going through the suburbs to get to the Target, and the stoplights are really obvious and people aren't jaywalking. That's
That's
probably
one thing.
another ball of
Yeah.
wax. But like, it's very different when you've got like folks running around and jaywalking in New York City. So anyway, that was not a great experiment. At one point, the governor was saying that she would let some Waymos operate in New York. She pulled that back. It got shut down pretty fast by labor unions. And I think, frankly, by everyone who's familiar with the taxi industry, that fell off a cliff when the medallions, the value of the medallions fell off a cliff, and have had to sort of come back over years. And the taxi industry is just clawing its way back. And so to have Waymos, come in and just sort of be the first example of AI, killing a workforce, I think the governor smartly put a stop to it. The mayor obviously sort of, I don't know if you followed this,
I
but
do.
like much of his campaign, he did a hunger strike with taxi drivers, and it's a big part of his political story. And so
And
he
what's the
obviously
state of play of free buses? I'm not following that. Is that, I mean, it's comping bus fare?
No, it's not. Well, it's not happening right now.
Hmm.
He promised fast and free buses. I think he's doing a pretty decent job of implementing faster buses. So he's trying to add some busways. He's trying to add some bus lanes. So he's working on that. There's a big debate over whether buses should actually be free. We have a program called Fair Fares, which is a half fare once you're under a certain income level. There's a lot of support for massively expanding that program so that it's like 4x, 5x,
Of
6x the
course.
poverty line. And I think that feels like it has more support right now than free buses because you've got a lot of Upper East and Upper West Side ladies who
Course. I
can't
know it's
afford to
the
pay
bus
the bus.
from Fairway, the crosstown bus. But Sarah,
It's
I
my
gotta
favorite constituency when I was at New York City Transit. It was like the old ladies who
the
rode the
old
bus.
ladies, the old ladies who would tell me that, what are you paying for your apartment? And she'd come out
Yeah.
with her cats like, I'm still paying
Yeah. They would like chase
$325.
me down in the streets and be like, Sarah, I want to talk to you about the bus service. I want to
But
talk about
I want to name drop. I would see Cynthia Nixon on the 104 bus, but that's neither here nor there. That was like, I would look at her, she'd look back, she's like, chill out, don't spaz out about this.
I
But
never see you famous on the M15.
marinate my mind a little bit on AI. I know you must get asked this all the time. You must get buttonholed. What are the unlocks with this? Is it traffic lights? Is it subway signaling? Is it, I mean, the enormity of, like, you talk about the number of stations, the number of cars out there, the number of vehicles for everything to work and not kind of crash Y2K style. What is kind of at the bleeding edge of that right now that can be put into motion?
I mean, look, one of my favorite uses of AI that New York is not using, and I really wish they would, is we've got this prevalence of ghost plates, which are fake license plates, and you can go on a bunch of websites and buy a fake license plate and roll through tolls, and like you're basically skipping out on, what could be, $30 a day, $40 a day, $50 a day. And of course, other taxpayers are paying for it. That, like, there is such basic, simple AI that will, recognize that is not the New York license plate. That is not the dealer plate. That is not the New Jersey license plate, and can so quickly like take the photo and then move ahead to signal the cop that like the car exiting the tunnel is should be pulled over. Like
That's available now. That's not kind
it's
of
so
Jetsons.
easy. That is
Yeah.
so easy, and it
Yeah.
is like we have a multi-million-dollar problem on toll collection in New York, and we just like lose that. And we're getting a little bit better, but we're like nibbling around the edges. So that's perfect.
Anything with bus capacity, like my beef was like, I'd be waiting on a freezing night when I'd have to take a bus or a crosstown bus, and three would show up, and then there'd be none for 35 minutes. Of course, there could be a handicapped person, and there has to be a
Yes.
special door that opens. Is that something that can be put to use right now? I mean, look, we didn't even have prediction signs telling you how long the next two train is far away.
Well, so first I'll say, to the MTA's credit, we got a lot better about that because we've got folks who are out in the system, every several stops or whatever along routes, knowing when the buses are going by, and will like, kind of solve for some of the clumping. But the biggest issue is not when three come all at once. The biggest issue is when you're waiting 15 minutes for one, right? If you're there when the three come, then get on one. But it's when you're there for 15 minutes and nothing comes that's a problem. And often that's a labor issue. That's like, a whole bunch of folks ended up flu, COVID, hangover from the Knicks, whatever. By the way, they're entitled.
They're absolutely entitled.
Whatever.
That was breathtaking to see. I wondered if it registered on the Richter scale. Like, there was nothing like this. I was there when the Yankees were winning, when the Giants were winning, but we were starved with the Knicks. That was a long, 53 plus years.
Usually when New York really comes together in a moment of like community and sort of like family is when something awful happens.
Yeah.
Sandy, 9/11, right? Like these tragedies that like bring the city together. The pandemic.
Okay, no, but the bagel and mayor and Muslim memes, I just love seeing them. I love seeing, like, Hasidic people in Park Slope dance with Caribbean people. It's there's always a piece of you when you've lived there. I know this is neither here nor there, but if I could conjure up one in the few minutes I have left, Sarah, if there's one AI hallucination I could conjure up, or a seance, it would be you taking a brisk walk with Robert Moses. Suppose he was taking you around the Tenderloin. Suppose you showed him what this monstrosity Penn Station has become. Suppose you took him on these gleaming new subway cars. Oh, there aren't like cloth straps. Like, what's going on? There's air conditioning. What would he make of all of this if you could brief him on all of it? What would he say? Would there be, do you ever wonder, or is it just my crazy mind? Like,
That is such a good. You're a major nerd. You're a
I
major.
am, but it's part. I got to tell you, this is what I've been thinking of watching because, as you know,
No, I
MSG
really
Penn
appreciate it.
Station was front and center. What would he say if we brought him back with a Ouija board or a
Yeah.
séance or a walk, a random walk down whatever the 13 miles of Manhattan with Sarah
So,
Feinberg?
look, first of all, I appreciate the nerddom because I am your sister in transportation nerddom. Like I'm the biggest nerd too. So I'm going to take your question and then I'm going to pivot into why we should all be optimistic. How about that? Okay.
Please.
So I think Robert Moses would be like, he would spend the first half of the walk being like, holy cow, I can't believe how the city has grown. I can't believe the High Line. I can't believe these beautiful subway cars. I can't believe, like, oh, finally, like Second Avenue subway, you've done more, you've done this, you've done that. What? There's easy, like, what's Easy Pass? That's amazing. Like, I think he would be amazed. And then I think he would go, but what about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Like 10 other things that you should be doing. And by the way, this is Robert Moses. So like some of them will be bad ideas. So like
Of
forget
course.
those, right? But of the ones that would be good ideas, right? He'd be like, but why? Like, where are those? And then he'd be like, oh, you haven't done it because you can't get along because of the egos, because of the money, because of the permitting, because of the court cases, because of the NIMBYism, because of like, and I'd be like, yeah, that's why. And he would be like, well, that is disappointing. That is disappointing. And then I would say, here's my pivot. But Robert, there's good reason to be optimistic. He would be like, what? And I would say, so for the last 50 years, NEPA, which is the environmental statute that sort of requires every project to go through an environmental process, has helped us make really good decisions, but it's also held up really important projects for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And the Supreme Court recently came out with a decision that basically, in my opinion, does more to improve the NEPA process than we've ever seen. Some environmentalists might disagree, but as a builder, I am like, it was a highlight for me. So that's number one. Number two is you're not going to believe who's in the White House. And we all have some serious concerns. However, he's a builder. And there's nothing he likes more than building big projects and putting his name on them. And I think we can all agree, I don't care what it's called as long as it gets done. Or at least I can say that. And so while we all have a lot of significant concerns about this guy in the White House, he's a builder. And like we might actually make some progress on Penn Station and some other really big projects at the moment. And then the final thing you should be really optimistic about is that there's this crazy moment that we're in called abundance, where people like me and parts of you, Robert, and others who've been, like we should be able to, I don't know, build a public toilet in a public park so that like people can, families can play there. Instead of that taking like 5 years and $3 million, like there's this whole movement out there that wants to make things like that happen faster and build housing. And he would be like, wow, those are some things to be optimistic about.
And I wonder if he'd be made more optimistic by the confluence of halal and stinkweed marijuana on every corner. I mean, that has to give you a contact high. It certainly wasn't out there the Mary Jane as much back when he was running prevalent. In the few minutes I have left with you, Sarah, I have to ask about you. You're a product of West Virginia. And fill us all in how West Virginia became, you became this indispensable city slicker. And how you came, I don't
know. You said it, not me.
From college, going into Bloomberg, I worked in that building. It was at 731 Lexington by then. You have to put a brave face on, to put that vest on, the MTA thing, and to kind of take this on and to be the punching bag and to put yourself out there. Like, how did this happen? What are you made of? How were you deluded to take on these jobs? Go ahead.
Yeah. So born and raised in West Virginia, which remains my favorite place in the world. It's beautiful. It's a great place to raise a family. Unfortunately, there are very few jobs there now. Was raised in Charleston, West Virginia, in just a wonderful community, and had no idea I cared about transportation at the time. There was obviously no like commuter train. There was, but there was an Amtrak train that went by like I think twice a week. But it was mostly coal trains, CSX coal trains moving up and
Hmm.
down, which I would see every single day on my way to school. There'd be a big coal train going by, and I love to watch it go by. And for a while, I took a city bus to school, but that was kind of it. In high school when I was babysitting kids, I used to always take them. I used to take a bunch of them to the airport to watch planes land and take off. Yeager Airport, which has
Oh,
3 gates, chopped off the top of 2 mountains, piled the dirt in the middle to build a runway. And so, but I didn't even like know you could really have a job in transportation unless you were just like a train engineer, rail engineer or whatever. Anyway, but I loved public service. So I went to go work on Capitol Hill like, a gazillion 21-year-olds in 1999. I showed up on the Hill and I answered somebody's phone and I did casework and I learned how to help constituents like get what they needed from the federal government, specifically veterans benefits for veterans who had service connected
mhm.
disabilities. And I loved working on the Hill, loved public service. Very quickly did not like the political rancor and campaigns, but loved like the government work.
Mm.
And ended up in the White House. And my job in the White House for the first 2 years of the Obama administration was I was the senior advisor to the chief of staff. And I worked on the financial crisis, I worked on national security issues, and I worked on like whatever was kind of blowing up
I
that
mean,
day.
Rahm Emanuel did famously say, "Don't waste a good crisis," and that
Never let
was
a crisis go to waste. That's right.
right. So that
Yeah.
was 2008, and you had all of these failures go on. And I'm thinking about that. It's amazing, in closing, to go back and look at the way the Penn Central Railroad fell apart and Amtrak was set up is very much financial crisis like, and you needed
Yeah.
that
Right.
intervention. And it seems like that crisis was wasted. And I thought of all people who were kind of constituted and flung into this system, both with your public affairs experiences and
Yeah.
then willing to put on the vest and do what you did for the New York City Transit Authority.
Yeah. Well, I think what that was it's you've spent enough years working on the Hill. You're sort of sitting on the sidelines watching your boss make decisions and forming your own opinion about what should be done and how something should be handled. And at some point, at least in my opinion, I sort of got to a point where I was quite confident that I knew how to make the decisions and how to execute. And I just wanted the ball. I've always just been someone who wanted the ball. And I'm not interested in like having the most high profile job. I want to like make good decisions and like have a big impact. So I'd rather be at a place where I can have an outsized impact than be at a place where you get a lot of name recognition and don't have that much of an impact. And so I became chief of staff at the Department of Transportation, and that's when I really fell in love with transportation issues, with rail, with airlines, with transit, with NHTSA, with investigations. I learned how to run investigations. I learned how to be a regulator. I loved being a safety regulator. There's nothing that sort of more gratifying than like figuring out ways. We have a very safe system, but like when something goes wrong and it goes very wrong, figuring out what can be done to prevent that from happening again. And I long viewed, being the transportation commissioner of New York City or running the subway as the two best jobs in America in transportation.
Let me ask, isn't I would, and it says we're cut from different cloth. I would be really scared. You'd be this pain sponge. People would complain to you left and right. It's like a thankless, winless thing. But there, you have to be a
Yeah,
special kind of person that says, "Put me in, coach."
I have a thick skin. I have a thick skin. I don't know. Like I was never worried about being a pain sponge or being criticized. I think one thing that served me well was I feel like I know how to communicate with people, whether it's the media or my boss or a constituent or someone who I work with. And so, one thing I don't think you can ever accuse me of is like not explaining myself or not explaining the problem. And so, when I was running the subway and bus system during COVID, there was no hiding the ball. It was like, this is what we're dealing with. Let me just explain to you what we're dealing with. Let me explain to you how I'm going to try to clean this place. Let me explain to you where I think you should stand. Let me explain to you the kind of service I'm going to run and why I'm running that service and why it might get better and why we might have to scale it back. Let me explain to you why the 5 is not running. It's because we lost all the crews. Let me explain to you why the 2 is running because we do have crews. So, let me have a town hall meeting with like every single employee, like do it in packs of 150 until I reach every single person and they can ask me anything. And if you know your stuff, they ask you questions and you're like, let me explain to you why we did that on the 4. Let me explain to you why your hours just shifted on bus. Let me explain to you why we're still going to run service even in the snowstorm. And like, if they see you as someone who can like take any question, they might be like, I disagree, but she knows her stuff and she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, I'd be taking up a lot of drink or medication. So God bless you, Sarah Feinberg. Sarah Feinberg, you're like a veritable, you're a transit hub. There's no better way. You could call you a transit guru, but formerly headed the New York City Transit Authority, administered the Federal Railroad Administration, formerly chief of staff for the Secretary of Transportation in the Obama administration. She's been on Amtrak's board. She's currently a director at Southwest Airlines. I did not even do justice to your LinkedIn, but it has been such a blast having you on.
So
Clearly,
fun.
I could have gone on for hours and hours and hours. As I was watching the world watch MSG in Penn Station, and I saw that tableau of Trump and Dolan in that box, I said, I got to talk to Sarah Feinberg. That's just the way my mind works.
It can be so much better. I think it's going to be a lot better.
Please feel welcome to come on anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Full disclosure, special thanks to Ian Stewart. If you are listening to us on the radio, note that while we cut for broadcast link, the entirety of every interview is on podcast. We are on the NPR network, Spotify, Apple. Watch us on YouTube. You could find them all at one link, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. And please do recommend us to a friend. A shout out to our home station, WVTF Radio IQ, Virginia's NPR news source. DM me to carry us on your air. And catch me every week on both CNN and NPR's Here and Now. I'm Robin Farzad. Thank you for listening. Back with you next week.